Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to this program. Sorry, yesterday we had to cancel the discussion because we had some problems. We're out of town. Tonight we'd like to discuss an issue that I think is at the heart of our problem. Why is it that Africa, we have had this endless cycle of yesteryear's liberators becoming today's oppressors? And to make matters worse, they don't seem to be aware of it. Indeed, some of them, they even believe they are the ones who are being abused in the sense that they should not be challenged, uh, which is ridiculous. I'd just like to play a video clip of one of Africa's presidents who had initially, when he first came into power, people were impressed with him, but since many people have had second thoughts, and rightly so too. President Paul Kagame of Rwanda. Let's just listen to what he had to say.
You really need to stop this superiority complex nonsense about human rights. You think you are the only ones who respect human rights, or others it's about violating human rights. No, we've fought for human rights and freedoms of our people much better and more than anyone, including you people who keep talking about this nonsense. Where we have taken our country from and where it is now speaks for itself. The rest of the story just comes from this complex. You know, these two worlds where there are people who know everything about human rights and all kinds of things, and another world where people are just people who don't know. But these are our human rights. It's not when we respect the things we respect in our countries. It's not for you. It's not for anybody else. It's for ourselves.
Is it not
so
universal?
You don't sit there. Yes, it is universal, but you don't sit there. If it is universal and you believe it, then you don't become the judge yourself. You don't start telling the others what to do, what they should not do, or that what they are doing is not to your satisfaction. Who are you? Or what the whole list you've been spelling out as if what is in Rwanda is really hell. In fact, forgetting the hell that we have gone through, that we stood against and sorted out when you were there, just talking about more or less nonsense. Because
do you reject the accusations, for example?
It's rubbish, absolute rubbish.
You reject
Rwanda is completely different from what it was 25 years ago. In fact, maybe you need to be looking around in Europe. You are violating people's rights. When we have this problem of people being bundled and sent back to sink in the Mediterranean and so on, and so many people being mistreated in your own countries, why don't you talk about your human rights and stop just offloading everything?
Well, this is a development conversation, so
no,
in the context of development.
You are not the one to determine what conversation or what points to raise in any conversation. We are asking questions. This is what I'm saying. You are asking questions and you are giving yourself answers.
But
Ben, what do you think of that?
Good day to you and good day to our viewers. Thank you for joining us. You know, I think we have a best excuse for not achieving better. And our excuse is the other person is doing it, so why can't I? If you see somebody stealing and getting away with it, you would rather opt to steal as well, because it's now something that you are seeing around you, instead of being the better person and doing the right thing. Because at the end of the day, two wrongs never make a right. I sincerely believe, yes, in as much as the West are also violating some rights out there, it does not then justify us to go full out and violate our own. So for that part, I do not agree with the Rwandan president. I think if you are going to be defend doing the right thing. Do not go there and say, because you are doing there, you don't have the right to judge us. At the end of the day, it becomes chaos.
Well, I have to emphasize here that the argument when you say you are violating human rights, if you start saying, "Oh no, 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 we are not violating human rights because we fought for them," it's a fallacious argument in the sense that you are failing to accept that the fact that you uh, were yesterday's liberator, you cannot be today's oppressor. That is a nonsense. The facts speak for themselves. What we are talking about here is, yes, the colonialists, the white colonizers were oppressors yesterday, and you have become the liberator. Are you oppressing your own people? And that is what is at issue. And so the whole argument that you cannot tell us about violating human rights because we fought for the liberation of our people yesteryear doesn't mean anything at all. Yesterday's liberators have turned around and become today's oppressors. And indeed, this is exactly what we are focusing on here. How yesterday, Africa's case is yesterday's liberators are today's oppressors. And they are not even aware of it. In other words, President Kagame, he seems to be saying, no, I'm not oppressing my people because I liberated them yesterday. That is nonsense. Anyone can become an oppressor. And I think it becomes even more important in our situation because, let's face it, when you have an oppressor, they do not give you the chance to articulate your rights. Take the example of Zimbabwe. If a Zimbabwean say you have failed to hold free, fair, and credible election, Zanu PF response to that is typically that you are a Western puppet. What you are saying is what the West has told you to say. In other words, they never acknowledge that you as an individual, as a black Zimbabwean, can articulate on your rights and your freedoms. You have to be told by somebody else. A borrowing, of course, from the white days when the whites insisted that all our blacks are happy. They have nothing to complain about. And anyone who complains about the blacks being oppressed, they are wrong. Our blacks are the happiest in Africa. So you as an individual, you are not given a voice. You are not given any opportunity to express your views. And when somebody else expresses it, they dismiss them too as, no, you are a colonizer and they've got your own agenda. So at the end of the day, the ordinary black person has no voice.
And I also think this idea to say that, we fought for our, for our people's rights, or we fought for a certain country, and so forth. It's all wrong. You are taking ownership of the liberation struggle. And for example, I mean, I believe the liberation struggle for Zimbabwe was done by Zimbabweans, despite being a Zanu PF, ZAPU, or even just being neutral. People just went out there and sacrificed in whatever ways they did. Some carried guns, we know. Some provided support to those that were fighting, and some were spreading the word and mobilizing or whatever. you know who owns the liberation struggle? I believe it's Zimbabweans. And to then say, we as a liberation movement, we fought for the country. I don't think there is that room for that ownership. Zimbabweans played their part, and Zimbabweans should own their part. And with this here ownership, where they say we as liberation movements, we did this, now you seem as if we did it for the people, so we can take away the rights, and or we have the absolute right to do as we please within the boundaries of our country. I think that is wrong, and we need to change that narrative to say we take ownership. Well, I believe Zanu PF did not, free Zimbabwe by themselves. A lot of people out there did whatever they could, whether they liked Zanu PF, whether they liked, Bishop Zorewa or whoever. Everybody played a part, and everybody has, a stake in Zimbabwe, and it shouldn't be for the Zanu PF or Zanla to own the whole thing. This is where you find, once you have that authority over others, or you think you did greater than others, this is where you start seeing the rights, being other people's rights being infringed. And I feel that there needs to be corrected. Nobody did anything for anybody, but everybody did something to free our country.
I've got here a dialogue uh, on X between Nelson Chamisa and this some other gentleman, but I think it is relevant in this discussion, in which he's saying, I bet my last dollar that it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for you to become president. It won't happen because you're all Zanu PF enablers. He was talking of Nelson Chamisa. You go to funders, you get funds, live in opulence, and go to elections afterwards. Go to elections, and afterwards you go into your hall and enjoy the money. And this is what Chamisa said in reply. Which is basically saying that is nonsense. Mafungiro enyu kuti inyore kurwisa dictatorship haisi nyore. Tine mavanga murwendo urwu. I think this has become not only a typical answer from not only just Chamisa, but from Zanu PF itself. How many times, and I think Benjamin, you were referring to it there, how many times have we heard Zanu PF say, we liberated this country? But the point here is, even Zanu PF, the sacrifice you made, it should be understood that, take for instance, today's generation who are being denied the right to a meaningful vote. They were not even there to join the liberation war. So if we are saying that they should have played their part, they should have contributed, they were too young, they were not even there. Some of them may argue, maybe our forefathers, our brothers, our uncles, and so forth, some of them would have made a contribution. But as we know, anyone who paid the contribution and paid the price, some of them didn't even come back from the liberation war. They have not been credited with their role. So their family have no credit at all. But to come back to this one, to Chamisa's one, if we are going to say Chamisa and his colleagues in MDC should not be held to account because tina mavanga. And here is a photograph of Chamisa in hospital after he had been attacked by Zanu PF. His leader, Morgan Tsvangirai, had his fair share of the brutal treatment too. Nobody is belittling the suffering they received. But even they have got to acknowledge that the suffering that the MDC, CCC have suffered under Zanu PF is nothing compared to the nationalists who fought to end white colonial rule. So in this case here, are we saying then that Zanu PF has the right to become the oppressors? After all, they suffered more than Tsvangirai and company. Of course not. And by the same token, Tsvangirai and company cannot say they are not accountable because tina mavanga. No. We have got to accept that each generation was given a role to play. In the case of Zanu PF, they were fighting for the dignity of all Zimbabweans, for freedom, for liberty, for justice. They just hijacked the liberation war for their own selfish ends. They were yesterday's liberators and became today's oppressors. By the same token, the MDC, in their case, they have not even achieved what they set out to do, in the sense that they were elected to bring about democratic changes to end the Zanu PF dictatorship. They didn't. They failed to implement even one token reform. Yes, they've got wounds to show for their involvement in Zimbabwe politics, but you can't say that they delivered anything. And one of the reasons why they fail to deliver anything is like Zanu PF. They become greedy. Zanu PF leaders were able to bribe them, and they forgot about the very thing they were elected to do. So we can come back to the same theme again and say the same thing, that yesterday's liberators in Africa have become today's oppressors. And they've given all manner of idiotic excuses why that is so. In the case of our friends in MDC, the excuse has been Tine mavanga. Ending a dictatorship is not easy. You have not ended it. You sold out on what you were supposed to do. And now you seem to think you've got the right to do as you please, and you should not be held to account. Asking the opposition MDC Triple C to account for why they failed to implement even one token democratic reform in 25 years has become impossible. Just as asking Zanu PF thugs to account why 45 years after independence, they failed to deliver free, fair, and credible elections and other fundamental freedoms and human rights. They cannot account for it because both of them have suffered this problem of yesterday's liberators becoming today's oppressors.
I've always said, when you closely look at the opposition and then you look at Zanu PF, how they operate, how they say their things, and how they go about their business, you can see they are similar. There's so many similarities that it is just, absurd to not see it, because it is clear as daylight. I mean, they're in a habit of owning, any developments or any movements that would have happened. Just the same way where Zanu PF hijacked the whole liberation, movement and made it all about themselves. That it turned out to be they now had the divine right to rule over Zimbabwe and nobody else. To such an extent where Mugabe would say, you know, you can never remove us out of power by using a pen. No, we would go back and carry arms at the end of the day. That already shows that, he's just taken away the rights of people to choose who they want, to lead them. The same way where you find, Chamisa there is saying, I have scars. So, I should be the next in line. It's either me or nobody else. Where, some guys can have scars that are self-inflicted. Does that mean that they should, own the whole, movement to free ourselves from, today's oppressors? No, I don't think so. But what scares me the most is, I'll give you even an example. We have the Geza movement that, shook most corners of Zimbabwe, where a lot of even, so-called thinkers out there were saying, let's just support, Geza and make the move and make the transition into, and then we'll figure it out, in the next day. But you find here Geza is saying to you directly to say, let us go and liberate ourselves. A good thing. But after we've liberated ourselves, you don't have the choice. You don't have the right to choose, because I've already chosen for you. It's going to be uh, Vice President Chiwenga that is going to be the next in line. And a lot of people actually agreed to such arrangements, despite, like I said earlier, the facts, being right there. It scares me. What scares me the most is our inability to learn and to adapt. Mugabe and Zanu PF, they just didn't happen to be there. Mugabe and Zanu PF were created by Zimbabweans. We uplifted them and put them on a high pedestal that they became untouchable. We could not ask any questions about any decisions or any directions that they wanted to take the country. And hence they grew so many, so much big wings that it is now very hard for us to catch up to them. We created this monster. And if you look all around Africa, we created the monster. The guy that is talking there, the president from Rwanda, how did he get there? Who gave him that power? You will find out it is the people that did that. So our inability to learn, here we are, we wanted to remove Mugabe and gave so much power to Mnangagwa. Now he's become a burden to us. But then hold on a minute. Did we learn from that? No. We were about to even go the next step further to get Chiwenga and put him into power. And we could still do that. And then it will turn out to be a complete disaster again. Are we going to learn from that? No. We will probably be wanting to get Chamisa back in because he was our only hope, they say. A lot of people come out, they say, look, Chamisa has left the political scene. There's a big vacuum. There was always a vacuum in leadership because we don't have that quality. The current is all junk. That is the truth. We don't have any leadership material in both the opposition and the ruling. What we need is to look for those qualities when we are choosing a leader. And once we are doing, that, hard search, we then see the flaws and we see the good qualities, and we evaluate, can this certain individual be the next best step? Not just because somebody stands up and say, congratulations, Zimbabwe, you have found your liberation. He's telling you exactly what you wanted to hear. And once somebody is doing that, they are simply manipulating you to believe what you want to hear. Hook, line, and sinker. And we are back to square one. We have created another demon or another monster. So I think we also got to address to say, in as much as we have got oppressive, black on black, leaders or dictators, we have equally the same, naive, gullible citizens that really do not know how to make a choice when they are looking for a leader for themselves. I think we should address that. Our thinking and our ways of choosing leaders is less to be desired.
I just want to emphasize the point that was made by Margaret Dongo, herself a liberation war heroine in her own right. She fought in the liberation war. And when she came back, she was initially working for the government as a CIO, and then became a member of parliament. And then when she fell out with Zanu PF leaders, she stood as an independent member of parliament. And I think as an individual, history will record her for her open-mindedness. Here she is admitting that the people in Zimbabwe are not free, particularly those in the rural areas, by design.
They have wrong priorities, especially the current government. How can you go and build an airport which services a few people, and the majority are the elite and the so-called investors? Look at the rural. I made you come to interview me because I wanted you to have the experience of the roads that we are using. If we go today to our hospital there, you feel pity with that's a hospital in a rural area. If we go to our clinic, you feel pity. We have no piped water here. Do you know the reason why the rural people vote for Zanu PF? One, they're intimidated. Two, the policy is that the rural people should remain poor and subservient to the government. They should remain poor, because if they remain poor, they continue singing the song for their master. This is why these people have been impoverished. It's for a reason. Because at the moment, if you economic empower these people, they'll go out of hand. Zanu PF will never have control over them.
Point is a very valid point. But I would like also to bring it up in conjunction with the opposition. The people of Zimbabwe, since the late 1990s, have been electing the opposition on the understanding that they would implement the democratic reforms necessary to end the Zanu PF dictatorship. The one area where MDC, Triple C have completely neglected is the rural areas, where Zanu PF, ever since independence, has claimed that it has got the monopoly there. It's a no-go area. It's a Zanu PF stronghold. And it's for no other reason than what Margaret Dongo was talking about there. Zanu PF has kept the rural voters deliberately poor, and they are intimidated. The rural people are frog-marched to attend Zanu PF rallies and then to vote. Zanu PF has got proxies in the form of the headmen, the chiefs, the war veterans, the militia, and in the past, the Women's League members, whose principal task has always been to intimidate the rural people, making them subservient to the regime. I think it is no exaggeration to say that the rural people are no more than serfs in the medieval time, sense of that word, always trying their best to please their overbearing landlords. In Zimbabwe, we cannot talk of the people being free and independent until we break that link with Zanu PF. The stranglehold that Zanu PF has with the rural areas, with the rural folk. They are denied the right to own even 1 acre of land. They don't own anything. There are no title deeds. And this has made them weak economically and politically. Ironically, the white regime denied the rural people title deeds for the same reason. Zanu PF has maintained that position for also the same reason. Economically, if you keep the rural people economically disempowered, they will not ask for political power. They are serfs, always subservient to their political masters, Zanu PF, and the party's proxies. That is the reality.
You know, the biggest problem that we will have is if we are going to make excuses each and every corner, we are really not going to make any progress to liberate ourselves truly. Because I sincerely believe we are no better than what we were, you know, under the, for example, before 1980 in Zimbabwe. Because we are seeing ourselves being oppressed to the sense where, you know, fine, before 1980, blacks couldn't vote. But now you can vote, but your vote is meaningless. It still comes down to the same thing. There is no, you know, no votes if it is like that. You know, we have to call a spade a spade. And you know, it goes down as far as, you know, a lot of people in Africa have been calling to say, you know, we need a united Africa. It is a very good idea, but you have to now look at these same liberation movements, that so-called liberation movements that have taken ownership of liberation. Do you then see anybody between them, for example, Mnangagwa, Museveni, and even the Rwandan president, do you see him giving up his seat for a united Africa? The answer is no, because they now think it is their divine right to rule, and they will not give it up for anybody. So we can go about blaming, you know, the next guy, or to say the Westerners did this and did that. But at the end of the day, I think we are our own worst nightmare. We happened to not understand what we were fighting for in the first place, and how to maintain, you know, our rights and our freedoms. We really don't understand. Up till today, most people that have that right to vote do not even understand what that right really means. And if you cannot understand, you know, what democracy is, I don't think you can really practice it.
I would like to just refer to a recent comment by Chamisa in one of his postings, where he's saying, you can kill the dreamer, but you cannot kill the dream. This is one of the arrogance of our African leaders. Chamisa has failed to implement even one token reform in 25 years. And not only that, since the GNU, he has participated in flawed elections to give Zanu PF legitimacy. He has helped to perpetuate the Zanu PF dictatorship. And yet he won't accept it. He won't even admit it. As where we started there, where we showed the conversation between him and some other Zimbabwean who are saying Triple C and Chamisa will never be president of Zimbabwe because you guys are cooperating with Zanu PF. That is very true. MDC Triple C leaders have become Zanu PF Team B in all but name, playing for Team A to win and for Team A to have legitimacy. And yet, they're completely unaware of their role and still want to maintain that he is the one who is carrying the dream of the people, which is totally nonsensical. You cannot claim to be carrying the people's dream. And the dream is for freedom and a meaningful role in the governance of the country. You cannot claim that you are doing that where in reality you are doing the exact opposite. So I come back to the original statement I made, that we are not only cursed by these African leaders who, some of them, not all of them, were yesterday's liberators and yet have become today's oppressors. In the case of MDC Triple C, they did not liberate the country. They failed to implement even one token reform to end Zanu PF dictatorship. And yet, they claim that they are the ones who are carrying the torch. So today's oppressors are not even aware that they are oppressors. And some of them were not even liberators in the first place. But unfortunately, the ordinary people themselves have failed to read the writing on the wall. There is absolutely no excuse why millions of ordinary Zimbabweans out there have failed to see the opposition for who they really are. Just corrupt, incompetent sellouts. Their failure to realize and see the opposition for who they really are is one of the reasons why we are a failed state. We keep going round and round in circles. If we are going to have any meaningful change in Zimbabwe, in the late 1990s, we realized that change could only come if we can elect an opposition leaders who will implement the democratic reforms. Because we had accepted the reality that Zanu PF will never reform itself out of office. 25 years down the line, the people of Zimbabwe have got to say to themselves, the opposition that were entrusted the task of implementing the reforms to end the Zanu PF dictatorship have since sold out. They failed to implement even one reform. And Zanu PF has been clever enough to bribe them to keep participating in flawed elections, to give the process legitimacy and the regime legitimacy. We, the people, should have woken up to that reality. We should be the ones who are well aware that Chamisa and company, as much as they claim that they are the ones carrying the nation's dream, they are not. But as long as he's able to sell the people the idea that he is the one who is going to fight for the people and they support him, Zanu PF will go along with that. Because Zanu PF needs the opposition to carry the country. Zanu PF's legitimacy comes from the opposition participating in flawed elections and the ordinary Zimbabweans being conned to participate in those flawed elections in their millions. And there's the reason why we keep going round in circles. Ben, do you want to give your closing remarks?
In closing, I wanted to just talk about something that you spoke, and you said that yesterday's liberators, are today's oppressors, but they do not know. I don't think it's a fact that they do not know. I think they actually know what they are doing, but they are fine with it because of their hunger for power. I mean, look, we have in 2013 we got a new constitution, a constitution that was basically written by some Zanu PF, well, let's say Zanu PF itself, because Zanu PF claimed that the constitution was their baby. In that constitution, they talk about human rights. They talk about elections, free, fair, and credible elections, but they do not practice any of that. So I would say they are aware of what constitutes free, fair, and credible elections, but they just do not practice it. So that does not then equate to ignorance. It is deliberate. Just like what Margaret Bongo said there, that ZANU PF has deliberately, done oppressive things to individuals or to the citizens of Zimbabwe. So we cannot let them get away with that. To say they do not know, they know, but it is their hunger for power. I mean, I'll give you an example like the one that I gave you before. Where Mugabe, in his speech in front of thousands of people, said, "I will not let, you know, Zimbabwe be, have a change of leadership through a pen, the pen that you use to cast your vote. No, I will not let that. In fact, if that were to happen, we would go back to the bush and fight another war." So that there in his speech, he is saying that to hell with democracy, we will do it our way, and it's our way, or it's the barrel of the gun. So they knew. He knew what he was talking about, and that alone is oppressive. That away, that alone takes away the rights of citizens of Zimbabwe. So we cannot give that as an excuse.
Well, my closing remark would be that I think Africa's leaders have got to realize that as much as the fight until recently was to end white colonial rule. It was not all there is to it. We in Africa, we have remained behind and one of the poorest continents in the world because we have not had a history of respecting human rights and good governance. And to somehow pretend that the end of colonial rule ended the case of bad governance is to miss the point completely. The truth of the matter is, ending colonial rule only meant that those white colonial oppressors were replaced by another set of oppressors. Black on black oppression is nothing special. It is still oppression. It is a pity that nations like Rwanda that has suffered the genocide, which is well documented, and the likes of President Paul Kagame's role in ending that violence and bringing peace to that country is well known. The tragedy is, ever since they came into power, they failed to create a political environment in which there can be confidence that Rwanda will never, ever have to put up with more violence, which is a pity. Because as much as he has managed to maintain the peace, his successor, if he too wants the dictatorial powers that President Kagame has enjoyed, he will claim them. And to enforce them, he may be tempted to resort to violence. And as for the good economic policies that has made Rwanda economically well off, he may not have the same vision. And trust me, it is even easier to destroy than to build. Whatever he has achieved all these decades can be destroyed in a matter of months if a bad leader was to emerge. The long-term prosperity, peace in Rwanda depends on creating a political system which guarantees that. And having free, fair, and credible election is one system to guarantee that. Leaders who think they have the divine right to rule are the curse of Africa, of any other country in the world. And that should be the lesson that we should have learned by now. And when outsiders say that you are failing to protect the human rights of your people, I think it is a feeble defense to say, you can't tell me that because you're an outsider. I think you should address the issue itself. Is it true that you're failing to hold the human rights of your own people, particularly as is the case in many other African countries, where the country's own laws and political systems have denied the ordinary people a voice. If outsiders cannot speak for them, who will speak for them? You don't have to be told by somebody that you've got to give all your citizens a meaningful say in the governance of the country. That should be the number one task that every leader should aspire to. I repeat, no one has the divine right to rule. You are just as fallible as anybody else. And therefore, then you should be held to account. When you're dealing with national issues, every citizen should have a meaningful say in the governance of their country. That should not be negotiable. That is not negotiable. Because the right to a meaningful say is more than a right. It is the essence of good governance. And that is the one blessing that Africa has lacked during colonial rule and after independence. We need to put an end to this madness. Rwanda is only stable now while they are still alive. The day you die, and you are a mortal being like everybody else, and you will die. As long as there's no stable political system in place, anyone can claim to be the president, and if they're not strong enough to impose their will on the people, there could well be a fight for it, destabilizing the country. And even if the person emerges, the temptation to be a dictator cannot be denied. As I said, Africa's case is yesterday's liberators are today's oppressors. And some of them, they don't even know it. We need to end this case. Thank you very much. Have a good day.